Hello there, people of the internet. The idea of preparedness or prepping for as cheaply as possible is a concept that has been around since, well, the concept of preparedness. And throughout a majority of history, in the guise of preparedness, certain things and certain aspects have been kind of mainstream in the concept that due to modern technology and modern advances with our modern economy, some of those once mainstream things are no longer viable in today's prepping world. And I think that the biggest aspect to that particular argument is going to be the firearms that once were viable for prepping that no longer are. And it is a really sad sight to see, and it's crippling to think about. But if you look at some of these old school military surplus guns, like for example, the Mosin Nagant, this particular one is an model 1891/30, so a 9130. It's a 5-shot bolt-action Mauser chambered in 7.62 by 54R. You used to be able to get these for very cheap, like under $100 level of cheap, and you used to be able to buy the 440 tins of ammunition for extraordinarily small amounts of money. And because of those extraordinarily small amounts of money, you got yourself a full power 5-shot bolt-action rifle and ammo for a really reasonable deal, and it made it just ideal for the prepper community. You could go out and get yourself a whole case of these Mosins and, you know, a whole crate of ammunition, and you would not have spent a whole lot of money at all, but you would be able to arm a good number of people or have a fair number of rifles in whatever bug out locations it is that you decided to go with. It was definitely one of the better options, but unfortunately, just because of supply and demand, essentially, the imports on these dried up and the prices went up, and then people started selling them at extremely inflated prices with the claim that you're buying history, even though those same people 10 years ago called these garbage rods, and I guarantee the history hasn't changed within those 10 years. They're just looking for an excuse to charge more money. Those people just charging more and more and more and more, and then people paying that more money because the arguing point of you're buying history, have turned these firearms into collectible items as opposed to prepper items. The Mosin, like I said, 10 years ago was 110% something that people went to for a prepper firearm without any concern as to what it had done historically speaking. For the most part, most of these rifles just spent their life inside of a warehouse and never saw any history whatsoever, but that's probably an argument for another video. The point is, the prices on these Mosins raised and continued to raise to the point to where most people deem them not worth it, myself included. The issue is, some people out there do still deem them worth it, so they're willing to go out and spend the $500-600 for a refurbished, bottom of the barrel, bare bones, basic M9130, and because they're willing to buy it, that's just kind of what the prices have stabilized at. And the issue with that is, if you want to go out and get it for a collectible firearm, by all means, go ahead and do that. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. But the idea of getting one of these for a prepper firearm is just not viable anymore. Why go out and get yourself a Mosin in a 7.62x54R cartridge, which is going to be corrosive, and you're going to spend the same amount of money on that 7.62x54R than you would on, like, modern surplus 308 ammo? You can go out and get yourself a modern bolt-action rifle like a Mossberg Patriot or a Savage Access or a Thompson Center, or insert your choice of modern bolt-action here, for almost half the price that you'd pick up this Mosin. And that modern bolt-action rifle, you can mount an optic to it without any significant modifications. It's just going to be a much better option. They also got the external mags to it, so if you felt like getting yourself more mags to it, you can swap out those mags pretty gosh darn quick. You could do that. I know for a fact some of those rifles, they have like 10-round, 20-round mags to them too, that you can stick onto your rifle. I know they got extended mags for this thing, but boy, those are long and cumbersome and not great. It's just, the Mosin is just not worth it as a prepper rifle in terms of the cost just the cost that you would be picking up the rifle for. Again, if you want it for a collectible, go for it. You do you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But for a prepper rifle, it's a no-go for me nowadays. Same thing with this right here. This is an SKS. For the longest time, this was like the prepper's rifle. 10 rounds, semi-automatic, 7.62x39. 7.62x39 was a really good, cheap cartridge that you could find overwhelmingly abundant for a very long time. But nowadays, 7.62x39 is basically the same price as 308. It's like 60 plus cents a round, which is absolutely insane. That is nuts. It's an intermediate cartridge. It should not cost that much money, but it does, and that's just the world that we live in. These 7.62x39 SKS rifles, with the amount of money that you're spending on something like this, you can go out and get yourself a fairly decent entry-level AK, and the entry-level AK is going to have, you know, the side mount or that you can throw a mount on, so you can stick a scope or optic onto your rifle if you so choose. It's going to be a much simpler system. There's much less to go wrong with your AK rifles, since it is a long-stroke gas piston system as opposed to the short-stroke gas piston system that the SKS has. There's really very little that can go wrong. With your SKS, I've seen a couple of these pistons get warped or mushroomed or whatever terminology it is that you want to call it, to the point to where the SKS rifle no longer reliably functions. It will still function, but not very reliably. And if you fire corrosive ammo to where you got to take all of the gas system apart, there's a bunch of little things in there that very much could very easily get lost, and it's just not ideal. Back in the day, whenever you could pick these up for under $100, dude, it was perfect. It really was like the bee's knees of prepper rifles. Semi-auto 7.62x39 for under $100, you'd go out and get yourself a crate of 10 of them, and then again, leave them at locations or hand them out to your buddies, or everybody standardizes on the cartridge. It really was a good force to be reckoned with for very, very cheap amounts of money. But again, for, you know, the $700-800 that these normally sell for nowadays, they're just not worth it, especially for the 7.62x39 cartridge and the amount of money that right there requires. It's just not worth it. For the price of that right there, you can go out and get yourself an entry-level AR that you can throw modern optics onto. I got a red dot on this. I got a magnifier on this. It's a 3-time magnifier. I got iron sights that co-witness with the red dot. I got a cheapo flashlight on this thing. I use this for coyote hunting. This is my Delton DTI 15. You guys have seen this on the channel plenty of times. But you can get yourself entry-level rifle for like $400, a bunch of magazines, a bunch of ammo, optic stuff, light. Just in this particular case, I got this Mosin sling on this rifle. I mean, it works well enough for coyote hunting. But the bottom line, this right here is a much more modern setup, effective firearm that uses a still very capable cartridge that is significantly cheaper and honestly significantly more available nowadays than 7.62x39. Like, this is by far the best prepper option out there as of right now. We've just gotten to the point where modern manufactured stuff is going to be a better option than your military surplus stuff if you're looking at it from a price point standpoint. Now, again, if you're looking for collectability and whatnot, that's a whole other arguing point. As you can see, I enjoy collecting old military surplus rifles. This right here is a hobby. If you're doing prepper stuff, that's not a hobby. That is you preparing to be able to save your life and your family life in the event that things go bad. Don't treat that like a hobby. Get the best stuff that you possibly can for the price point. Don't go out and get yourself old military surplus stuff with the mindset that you're going to be using it for prepping, because again, that's collectability, not for prepping. So I wanted to go ahead and get that off my chest. This is going to be kind of a short-ish video. I wanted to talk about it because to this day I still hear people say, I'm going to get an SKS as like a cheap go-to rifle. And like, man, those are not cheap go-to rifles anymore. This isn't 2005. Like, that is such a bad decision. Have you even looked at the modern market nowadays? That's such a bad decision. If you manage to find one for a cheap price and you're like, oh, I can get that for way cheaper than I could get an AK, like maybe you come across a sporterized SKS or something like that, and you don't care about collectability. It's just, hey, this guy's selling his sporter SKS with Tapco furniture and whatnot for $250. All right, well, that might actually be worth it, assuming that it's complete and reliable and whatnot. So that might be something to look into, but man, those things are all, like, all of those are individual bases based off of a private market, and all of that is you hunting down deals. And I guess you can always hunt down deals no matter what it is that you're going after. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.